So what's a synchrotron? Okay, that's your question? All right. So let's go back. Let's think a little bit about history. All right. So if you want to make particles and make them really fast, that's something you might want to do if you're interested in what's going on inside an atom. Okay. You heard the story about splitting the atom. Well, how do you actually split an atom? Well, one of the things you can do is effectively shoot it with something. So you can take a target and you can take a particle and fire it into a target, and that's kind of like trying to figure out what's inside a chicken by taking a chicken and firing it from a big cannon into a wall and measuring the bits that come off. Right? It works and it's kind of messy. It's fun. So people started off with things called linear accelerators, and then the problem with linear accelerators is if you want to go faster, you've got to have a longer accelerator, and there's a limit to how much real estate you can use for a science lab. So the linear accelerator we have in the basement, for example, is about 80 meters long. So one thing you might think about is, well, instead of having one long accelerator and you get one shot, why not have the particle go in a circle? Build a circular accelerator. And physicists, being back in those days not very imaginative, but with a good classical education, gave it a Greek name, and that was a circular tool, which in Greek is cyclotron. So a cyclotron was effectively two circular magnets, and you put the particle in the center, and the particle spirals out, so you have a fixed magnetic field. And eventually people said, okay, we need bigger accelerators, we want to get deeper into the heart of things. So they built very large cyclotrons. In fact, the largest in the world is in Vancouver, Triumph Lab. It's still there, it's still operational. But there's a limit to how big you can build a single magnet. So they said, okay, how about we build something that's not quite circular, but it's a combination of straight sections with curved magnets, and that means you can build bigger and bigger devices. But instead of having a constant magnetic field, you ramp the magnetic and the electrical field simultaneously in the electromagnet. So you have a whole series of magnets working at the same time in your cyclotron. So this is a working at the same time cyclotron, which is in Greek synchrocyclotron, which eventually became contracted to synchrotron. And they're still used today as particle smashers. The biggest machine ever, the biggest machine in the world is the Large Hadron Collider, which is in Switzerland and France. It's that big, it actually crosses the border. And that's what we use to find the boson, and that is a synchrotron. But something they realized back in sort of the 1960s, so we kind of have a problem here. It's, in some ways a good, in some ways a bad little bit of physics, which is if you get a particle moving fast enough, what we call relativistic speeds, and you accelerate it in a magnetic field, and in physics terms, acceleration is a change in velocity, which means either a change in speed or a change in direction. So even if you take a particle at the speed of light and it changes direction, you've accelerated it chemically. So if you accelerate a particle in a magnetic field, you get radiation. It's almost like if you've ever driven a car a little bit too fast around a corner, you get friction with the road, and you get a screeching noise, so you give off sound. But if you're going at the speed of light, and the road is defined by a magnetic field, friction, if you like, with the magnetic field doesn't give sound, it gives radiation. So you have hazardous radiation given off, which means you've got to build a lot of shielding, which is expensive, or you put it underground, like you do with the Large Hadron Collider. And you're also wasting energy. All this energy that comes off as radiation is being lost from your beam. So for the particle physics people, that's kind of a problem. And so what they did was take one of the curved sections on a synchrotron and effectively just put a pipe, which we now call a beamline, let the radiation come down there and actually use it for experiments. And this was incredibly successful, because what you have is the most powerful source of X-rays and UV light and infrared light that you can actually find on the planet. So after a few years of physicists doing condensed matter sort of operating parasitically on the back of the particle physics experiment, what you ended up with was people saying, we should build one of these things and not use it for particle physics. So just leave the beam in, just store it inside the ring, and have all these beamlines that use the photons for experiments. And that was what we call the second generation of synchrotron light sources.
Students on the Beamlines is a program where we try and take small groups of high school students and we connect them with scientists as mentors, and we give them the tools and the support so that they can pursue their own scientific projects. It's also a lot of fun, and that's when we get to know a lot of really great students like Danno. The first time a school participates, it's a collaborative process, so the CLS staff and the students and their teachers and scientists all work together to make a project that will be interesting scientifically, interesting to the students, and will work using synchrotron techniques. After that first year, then it's a competitive process. So, for example, the Centennial Collegiate students had to write a proposal, and that proposal was reviewed against all the other student proposals, and only the best ones were granted beam time. There are other facilities that are starting to do similar programs. The one that I know has a full program is called InSync, and it's at Brookhaven in New York. Part of the difference between their program and ours is that the students aren't actually allowed on site to do the experiment. Their teacher comes and students participate by webcam. So I just impacting society. I mean, I talked a little bit about the students thinking critically about societal issues and things like that. And we all know that there's a lot of issues that we're grappling with right now, things like global warming and all kinds of things, right? But I also think there's more to it than that. I'm hoping that this program is part of a larger educational reform attempt that I see happening in society, where students are able to negotiate some more of their own learning, kind of like this project, what you're doing, could create what you wanted to do. And you're exploring and learning based on that project in English. That's not dissimilar from students on the beamlines in science. And to, those kinds of things, an authentic learning situation for you that is of your making. So that's where I see this program as being part of something bigger that hopefully will have a huge impact on society as this generation of students that get to learn how to navigate these things in high school reach adulthood and keep going, navigating their own learning and their own careers and impact and as they walk through life.
Society? Well, definitely when they go back home they are going to talk about how cool the CLS is and how cool the experience was and all those, and then that is going to be probably the most predictable impact, because you cannot really say that they are going to be scientists or anything, but definitely they are going to talk about it for a long time. We went to Saskatoon, or we went to the CLS if they are from Saskatoon, and that is important because their friends are going to learn about us and learn about what can be done. Well, it's really just a belief. I hope it's going to impact science in a way that the students who come here are actually going to follow up with these type of experiments, or actually they have some kind of urge to do science. I don't know whether it actually will, but I believe it will. So.
We always came up with the idea of, let's have the students design an experiment where the answer isn't already known. That was really important, because if you've done high school science, you know the objective in a lot of experiments is you try and get the right answer, they're showed to the teacher and they say yes or no, you want the right answer. You haven't really discovered anything new. We wanted to do some real science. Well, something we wanted to do right from the beginning is not just encourage students who are interested in science to go into science, or encourage students who maybe didn't really like science to see what science is really like. We have a bunch of stories where people who, one of our favorite stories is the teacher almost didn't want to bring this particular student because they were essentially failing physics. This was one of the weakest students, didn't seem to be that engaged, but there was space, so she came. And she's now doing a science degree at university and is taking physics as part of her classes.
I mean, the program's impacting youth in the sense that it gives the students at the high school level an opportunity not just to come and work at a synchrotron, think about scientific inquiry within the context of developing their own research project, their own research questions. The idea behind the students on the Beamline is it is all original science, it is all original methodology, and so it's an opportunity that most students aren't exposed to in the system.
Because of this program, I went back to grad studies too. When I started this program, it was from the perspective of a teacher who doesn't have any training in science, landing myself at a scientific research facility and learning as I went, and knowing that students that are coming from high school can understand what this place is about, and knowing that students are very capable when they're given the supports that they need, and that there's a lot of societal thinking that goes on when students consider scientific research. And so because of that, I wanted to do some research too. My research is in the social sciences. So I interviewed, just like this, lots of students and teachers and scientists that were involved in the program to find out what they learned. So I might turn the tables on you, Danno, and interview you too.
I think it will lead to better scientists in the future. You don't learn in high school, or even really in university for the first few years, what it's really like to be a scientist. You are given an experiment that will work. Generally, you get the answer you expect, and you know you are right. When students come here, they learn pretty quickly that you don't have a canned answer. You don't know what the answer is going to be, and sometimes things don't work. And that's a lot of what it has to do with being a scientist. And if you like that and can handle it, you'll be a good scientist. If you don't, maybe poetry is more your speed, or something like that. But in the end, if people know what they're getting into, they can train better for it and be better at it. You know what? I don't know. We'll see. But maybe turn the camera around and you answer that, because you're the one doing it, and how are you planning on impacting society?
I'm really not sure yet. I think it'll help us find our path of what we're planning to do and what we actually can do.
Sometimes what I found with me is I would just zone out in the classroom because it was just an overload. Of course, in class, you don't get much practical application. Then going to the synchrotron and using the mid-IR and actually playing around with the frozen nitrogen, things you can actually see and do, and they give results right away. And I think the most important thing is you learn this theory in class, but then when you actually see it happen and it does work and it gives you results, I think that was a big thing. And that's what led me to go into the science stream in university. I guess it kind of upped my level of passion through science. It's like, okay, it's not all theory, you can actually see it happen and you can logically prove it. For me, it all comes back down to the hands-on experience. I went home and I told my parents what I did today, and they had no idea. In order to understand some of the things we were doing, you had to really know a very narrow stream of science. Just that experience, that knowledge that you acquire, I think that contributes to the student a lot. I know there are students coming from across Canada to the synchrotron that can go back in their community and talk about what the synchrotron is, because most people actually don't know that we have a synchrotron, or we are the only synchrotron in Canada. Even what we do or how it works. And just the passion, it kind of lights a little light, if you can say, in those students. Like, oh look, I did something in science. You know, it's not as boring as I thought. Gives them an idea of what they would do at university. At the synchrotron, there is no really part where it says that this is the chemistry part, this is the physics part, and this is the biology part. In high school, back in my day, when I took those, they were three separate things. And there was no interlane connection. There was no time connection. So that was a big thing that I got at the synchrotron, is how easily those three sciences came together. That was one of the big things I found really interesting, and gave me a perspective of how things in the real world or science world, research world work. Getting the benefit of this program is really important, because we are one of the few programs in the world that will let you get on the synchrotron. So what I would say is stick to something, pick something, don't thin yourself out, and then commit yourself. Block that time off. Go in with the mind frame that I want to learn something. I want to come out knowing more than what I went in with. And with that mentality, you will learn something. And believe it or not, that little bit of information that you learn in those little extracurricular activities, in clubs or at the synchrotron, will eventually come in handy. It will click in university or at a trade school or wherever students are going. Biggest thing I would say is be committed and you will get something out of it. And I know I did. I stayed true to the synchrotron club. I made sure I was there. I committed time to it, and I reached out and talked to people. I asked them questions. I wasn't afraid to ask questions, so that's another thing. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and you will get something out of it. I think that's my biggest advice for people in high school right now.
Navigate your own learning, take charge, but work with people, right? It doesn't have to be either or. You can work with people, and it's a negotiation. You have teachers at your disposal that are wonderful professionals that are interested in helping you navigate your learning. Work with them.